Today, tens of thousands of Canberrans head to the polls to elect their next government. Thousands of Commonwealth Bank customers are charged twice for purchases as the bank blames a glitch for the error. The opposition announces a $5 billion housing plan to tackle infrastructure delays. And a royal touchdown. King Charles and Queen Camilla arrived down under for the first visit by a reigning king to Australia. Hello and welcome to ABC News. I'm Ruby Cornish. The final votes are being cast as the ACT decides whether to give Labor an historic 7th straight term in government. Labor has governed in the Territory since 2001 and the Canberra Liberals say 23 years is long enough. Around 60% of the electorate voted before polling day, but for those yet to cast their ballot, polls close in less than 30 minutes. And while Canberra, like the rest of the world, has seen significant upheaval over the past 4 years, it was persistent issues that became key points of contention throughout the election campaign.
Succeeding Katie Gallagher in 2014, Andrew Barr is now the ACT's longest-serving Chief Minister. Through this election campaign, he's leaned in to being the only Australian leader left in office from the early days of the COVID pandemic.
The ACT will enter into a 7-day lockdown from 5 p.m. tonight.
After a string of election losses with comparatively conservative leaders, this term the Liberals have Elizabeth Lee at the helm. But her party's campaign still had its share of controversies. MLA Elizabeth Kickett was disendorsed before joining Family First. A candidate was accused of making offensive social media posts under a pseudonym, and Miss Lee made national headlines when her frustration with a journalist boiled over.
I think for Canberrans, I would hope that they don't see literally a second in terms of where, yes, I accept that I let an emotional reaction get the better of me and judge me based on that.
Instead, she hopes voters have focused on promises to tackle housing shortages, with a commitment to open up more land for development, including at Cowan Forest, along with a plan to ease cost of living pressures, which includes capping rate increases and reducing payroll taxes, proposals that became a point of contention at the leaders' debate.
The Liberal Party are proposing in this campaign to collect less revenue and spend more, and somehow improve the budget bottom line. It's magic pudding economics.
The fact is that no one should be taking advice on economic or fiscal policy from the worst treasurer that self-government has ever seen.
The major parties agree the ageing Canberra Stadium needs to be replaced, but Labor wants a new stadium near the Australian Institute of Sport, while the Liberals have proposed a stadium on the Acton waterfront.
Overlay that on West Basin and you see quite clearly that it's jutting out into the lake.
He's really clutching at straws. I mean, clearly it's an artist impression.
Labor and the Greens still want to cross Lake Burley-Griffin with light rail to Woden as part of a vision of a densified city. The Liberals remain opposed to the project, but with contracts not expected to be signed until 2028, tonight's result could determine whether this is Canberra's last light rail election.
ACT political reporter Harry Frost has been following all the developments and joins us live from a polling place in Braddon. G'day, Harry. What's the mood among voters where you are?
Well, Ruby, for the last few voters coming into this polling booth, it's probably a sense of relief that they didn't forget to vote at all. But that stands in pretty stark contrast to that point that you mentioned earlier, that most Canberrans had actually voted before today. Around 60%, according to the Electoral Commission, went to pre-polling booths around Canberra in the 2 weeks leading up to a voting day. It makes it difficult to actually judge the mood of voters. But from the few that we spoke to today outside of polling booth, there was a mix of opinions. Some people were happy with the status quo. Others were considering a mood for change. They were saying that there was maybe a need for independence, which again raises the question of whether we'll see that David Pocock effect that we saw at the federal election transferring down to an ACT level. Take a listen to what a few voters we spoke to had to say.
because Canberra is the only jurisdiction in Australia which has those rental cap laws, it enabled me to save for 4 years to finally build enough to have a deposit to become a first homeowner. So for me, the fact that the Labor government and the Greens want to continue that policy, that was an easy choice for me.
It's hard to identify with any of the major parties.
I think once a group has been in power that long, I think they get a bit too comfortable, and I think it might be time for a change.
So yeah, as you heard there, a mix of opinions, some for the status quo, others considering independence, a bit of a mood for a change among some people, but again, difficult to judge, not only because of the number of people who pre-polled, but also because of the lack of publicly available polling data here in the ACT. Of course, we won't have long to find out though. The polls will, or rather the voting booths will close at 6 o'clock and then the vote count will begin. Ruby?
Harry Frost in Braddon, thank you. Let's now go to Labor headquarters and reporter Patrick Bell. Patrick, how confident are Labor Party insiders that its vote will hold up?
Well, the Labor sources I've spoken to, Ruby, say they are reasonably optimistic that their voters will come out for them. They've pointed to what some of them have called the quiet Labor voters, the people who may not have been quite so vocal about their desire to vote Liberal or for an independent, but who at the end of the day, Labor sources feel will come out for a government that those voters may continue to approve of. The reality is there's very little likelihood that Labor can lose any of its 10 seats in the Assembly. It would take a pretty dire result in any one of the 5 electorates for that to happen. And so what that means is whether or not Labor continues to govern in the ACT is dependent quite a bit on the makeup of the crossbench. Now, for the last 20 years, the only crossbenchers who have been elected in the ACT have been Greens, and there are 6 at the moment in the last Assembly to add to Labor's 10 to make a reasonably clear coalition government in that case. What we might see at this election is some other independents breaking through, and Chief Minister Andrew Barr is open to the possibility that we may not actually have a clear result tonight if some of those tight races are yet to be called. This was the Chief Minister speaking about that a little earlier today.
We may not know that, the final seat in each electorate, possibly for up to a week. But if the Parliament has a progressive crossbench, then of course we would seek to work with those people to be able to form a stable government for Canberra.
So while the exact makeup of the Assembly is still to be determined, I haven't detected from the Labor sources I've spoken to any concern that there is a significant enthusiasm to change the government, but the numbers as they come in the next hour or so will continue to shed some more light on that for everyone.
Patrick Bell at Labor HQ, thank you. And Jade Tumi is at the Liberals HQ. Hi Jade, how likely is it that voters will bring the Liberals out of the political wilderness after 23 years in opposition?
Hi Ruby, I'm here at Canberra Liberals HQ, and it has been a very, very long time since the Canberra Liberals have been in government. In fact, it's been longer than some voters today have even been alive. In that time, the Canberra Liberals have changed leaders several times. At the moment, they're under the leadership of Elizabeth Lee, who made national headlines this week for her now infamous one-finger salute at a journalist at a press conference. But she does bring a more moderate flavour to the Conservative Party in the ACT, which is a very, very progressive jurisdiction. Now, we know that in 2020 the Canberra Liberals won 9 seats, and they're hopeful that they can at least do that again, optimistic that they could possibly get 10 or 11 seats in the Legislative Assembly this time. But in any event, it's very unlikely the Canberra Liberals will actually be able to form government in their own right. Any of the major parties are likely going to have to form a coalition with some of the minor parties or the independents that we have been hearing about. And if at the end of the night the independents do happen to hold the balance of power, Elizabeth Lee earlier today had a message for them, and she's been urging them to come good on their promises to make a change in government after 23 years.
if there is a position tonight that they hold the balance of power, my message is incredibly clear, and that is to say, make sure that you are true to the entire purpose of you running in this election, and that is to seek change.
That was Jade Tumi at Liberals HQ, and let's now go to the Greens HQ and reporter Courtney Barrett-Peters. Courtney, the Greens have spent the past term in a coalition. What are they expecting from tonight?
Ruby, well, insiders to the Greens that I've spoken to tonight say that they're optimistic about retaining 3 of their 6 seats. They're hoping to retain a 4th, but they do acknowledge that anything beyond that may be out of reach. Now, most of their seats are marginal, but they're particularly bracing for the loss of Laura Nuttall's seat in Brindabella. Emma Davidson's seat in Murrumbidgee and Rebecca Vassarotti's seat in Kurrajong are also quite under threat by the independents. Now, if they do retain more than 3 seats tonight, it will be the first time in ACT history that the Greens have been able to retain more than 2 seats for 2 consecutive elections. Now, the Greens have had a really difficult task at this election, needing to set themselves apart from Labor and having to differentiate their wins during their term of government for voters. Now, the Greens leader Shane Rattenbury says he is open to forming an alliance with the Canberra Liberals, but says that there is a lot that they do disagree about.
You've got to have some fair degree of policy alignment and a desire to work together. And certainly the Canberra Liberals have not indicated a desire to work with us, and their policy agenda around wanting to cancel light rail, to backtrack on climate action, these are really difficult areas where it would be hard to find common ground.
Ruby, it is still very empty here at the Polish Club tonight. Many Greens faithfuls are still out at polling booths, but it'll be not long until they're out here, hopefully celebrating tonight.
Courtney Barrett-Peters at Greens HQ, thank you. And tonight, ABC News will bring you live coverage of the count from our election centre at the National Museum, and James Glenday has had an early look.
So this is the ABC's election set, which has been built inside the National Museum of Australia on the shores of Lake Burley-Griffin. And tonight we are going to be bringing you the results of the ACT election from this large curved desk. We're going to be joined here by the outgoing Liberal MLA Nicole Lauder, the ACT Labor Health Minister Rachel Stephen-Smith, and the Greens leader Shane Rattenbury. And of course we'll be crossing to all the different election night parties that are taking place as well. Now, over here on this special platform will be the one and only Anthony Green, the ABC's chief election analyst. While he's away, I'm going to quickly steal his computer just to show you what the ACT electoral system looks like at the moment. You can see there are 5 different seats and each seat elects 5 different MLAs. So there are 25 spots in total up for grabs. Given the way the territory has voted in the past, it is very unlikely that either of the major parties will get to 13 and a majority. But at the moment, the Labor Party and the Greens combined hold 16 seats and govern together. The Liberal opposition has just 9. So the key question tonight is, can the opposition see 4 of these red and green seats change hands? And another key question is, will they be helped by a new crop of independents inspired by Senator David Pocock? Will the Greens vote surge, or will it in fact be the Australian Labor Party, which has dominated politics in this city for the past 23 years? Will it be Labor that wins another 4 years in office? We don't really know. There's no reliable published opinion polling in Canberra. However, we do know the votes are going to come in very, very quickly because a lot of people have voted early and a lot of people have voted electronically. So for you at home, what it means is that you need to be tuned into ABC TV from exactly 6 o'clock so you don't miss a thing. See you soon.
To some of the day's other news now, and Commonwealth Bank customers have expressed frustration after discovering duplicate transactions being taken out of their accounts, resulting in some people having overdrawn accounts. The bank blamed a glitch for the error and has promised customers they won't be left out of pocket.
Well, the Commonwealth Bank has so far not told us how many customers they believe are affected, but many of them have reached out to us or taken to social media to speak about this, and they've told us that they noticed this morning their accounts were either overdrawn or much lower than they anticipated, and that some, if not all, of the transactions they made yesterday had been charged twice. So a lot of people, as I said, took to social media to speak about this, and one said they were $400 overdrawn and wouldn't be able to buy nappies for their child. Another said they were buying medication at the pharmacy when their card got declined, and they all say that one of the biggest issues is that the Commonwealth Bank has not been able to tell them when this money will be returned to their accounts, and the communication from the bank has apparently been quite poor. I also spoke to a man in Melbourne just a short time ago.
I was buying a coffee, and I'm a chronic transfer over at the state of the transaction from one account to the another. I never leave any money leaving in my normal day-to-day account, and that's when I noticed that the account was actually in the minus, and I thought, wow, something's going on here. Yeah, we're on the phone with them for 1 hour and 55 minutes today for them basically to tell me we are aware of duplicate transactions, we are prioritising this very highly, we can't give you a deadline of when your money will be back, but we are working on it. And I said, look mate, it's not just me. There are thousands of us out here, and some of us are wondering how we're going to eat tonight and how even we're going to get home from work.
Now, the Commonwealth Bank has released a statement saying they're urgently reversing the transactions and any fees and charges will be refunded. They say it may take some time, but they can't say how much time that will be, and they have apologised to customers for the inconvenience.
Leah Harris there. Opposition leader Peter Dutton has unveiled a major new coalition housing policy in Perth today, a $5 billion fund to fast-track the development of new roads and water infrastructure to new housing developments. Political reporter Oliver Gordon has more from Parliament House in Canberra.
It really has been a week that's been dominated by housing, hasn't it? It started off with that news that the Prime Minister is going to be spending up to $4.3 million on his home in the Central Coast in New South Wales. That kicked off a discussion about negative gearing, with the Greens releasing some analysis suggesting a lot of renters could become homeowners under Labor's old housing policies. And then today, this announcement from the coalition, opposition leader Peter Dutton heading to Perth, heading to significantly a greenfields housing development site on the outskirts of Perth to announce this $5 billion fund that was really based around speeding up infrastructure delays. So that's as Shadow Minister for Infrastructure, who was also there, Bridget McKenzie, said the not sexy stuff when it comes to housing. So that's things like sewage, it's things like access roads, it's things like water, it's things like power. What this new coalition policy, which we're just sort of getting the details of now, what it appears to be stimulating really is construction of these sorts of infrastructure things which are critical to building new houses. The coalition says this will lead to around 500,000 new homes. This is what opposition leader Peter Dutton has to say about the coalition's new housing policy.
Today I announced that a coalition government will invest $5 billion into creating at least 500,000 new homes for people here in Perth, people in New South Wales and Victoria, in Tasmania, right across the country. This is a game changer for young Australians who can't see the opportunity yet to own a home.
Ollie, what has been the government response to this?
Well, Ruby, just moments ago we saw the Federal Housing Minister, Claire O'Neill, get up and really respond just initially to this new policy from the federal opposition. Here is Housing Minister Claire O'Neill. Here's what she had to say in these early stages responding to this housing policy.
Peter Dutton has already said he would cut $19 billion out of Labor's ambitious housing agenda. Now he wants a pat on the back for putting $5 billion back in. Peter Dutton's taking with one hand and giving with the other. It's a card trick.
Housing Minister Claire O'Neill suggesting that opposition leader Peter Dutton, taking with one hand, picking up with the other. Look, Ruby, it's clear we're not in the pre-election campaign officially yet, but from what we're seeing from both the major parties and the Greens, particularly this week, housing shaping up as a key election issue before we head to the next federal election.
A woman and 2 children have died after going missing in the water in Sydney's southwest. Emergency services were called to Floyds Bay in Landsvale following reports that several people were seen in the water in distress. Brianna Parkins reports.
A tragedy has unfolded on the banks of the Georges River this afternoon in southwest Sydney as the bodies of 2 children and their mother were pulled from the water. Emergency services were responding to calls a woman and her 2 children were in distress at a boat ramp in Landsvale at around 10 a.m. this morning. Bystanders attempted to help the family until police arrived. The 32-year-old woman was pulled from the water but could not be resuscitated. Acting Superintendent Luke Scott had this to say at Fairfield Police Station.
Search operation continued for the 2 children that were identified within the water. That search operation continued till about 2 o'clock this afternoon, where unfortunately we located the bodies of a 7-year-old male and a 5-year-old female within the water. This investigation has now moved from the search operation into the circumstances surrounding how those people came into the water, and it's a current coronial investigation as we move forward.
It's believed the mother and her 2 children were seen on a pier before they ended up in the water. Police initially commandeered a boat and a jet ski from the public to try and search for the missing children before a full operation was launched with the help of the SES. The search was conducted in wet and windy conditions against a strong moving current. Police investigations are currently ongoing.
3 people have died and 2 others are in hospital after a car crash in Perth's southeast. 6 men were in a car in Carlisle when the vehicle left the road and crashed into a home at around 5 o'clock this morning. Police say 2 men, aged in their early 20s, and a 34-year-old man died at the scene, while 2 others were taken to Perth Royal Hospital with serious injuries. The 22-year-old driver is assisting police with their investigation. Israel is ramping up its attacks on northern Gaza a day after the death of Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar. With the militant group seemingly rudderless, attention is now turning to its future as world leaders appeal to both sides to finally end the conflict.
An Israeli tank lines up its target, firing a deadly shot. The Israeli Defence Force is releasing more vision of the mission which killed the country's most wanted.
We mourn the leader, our fighter and brother.
Hamas officials speaking for the first time since the death of Yahya Sinwar, promising the group will not capitulate to Israel or release their hostages.
Those prisoners will not return to you until the aggression on our people in Gaza is stopped.
A seemingly unlikely prospect as Israel's defence minister vows to stay in Gaza for years. However, his death is bringing hope that new leadership could take the conflict in a new direction.
Now, we must make the most of this moment. What is needed now is a ceasefire in Gaza.
But US President Joe Biden is admitting peace in the Middle East will be hard to achieve.
We think that there's a possibility of working for a ceasefire in Lebanon, and it's going to be harder in Gaza.
Israel may have hoped that releasing drone vision of Sinwar's final moments would have helped in its public relations campaign, given it something of a trophy after months of searching for the Hamas leader. But it may well have had the opposite effect, emboldening Hamas, its supporters and the broader Palestinian community, giving them an image to cling on to of a martyr fighting until his dying moments.
I was extremely proud and I was sad for him. He was among the resistance and not hiding.
May he rest in peace. He has become a symbol for the whole world.
In Gaza, dozens of dead and wounded are rushed to hospital as Israeli forces ramp up attacks around a refugee camp in Jabalia.
The airstrikes have increased against our homes. We don't know what they want. They killed Sinwar as well as Haniyeh. No one is left.
The IDF bolstering its forces in and around Gaza City, while Palestinians watch and wait for the next strike. Matthew Doran, ABC News, Jerusalem.
To the US now, where the November presidential election is rapidly approaching. Democrat Kamala Harris and Republican Donald Trump have both set their sights on the key battleground state of Michigan. The Vice President began her day in Grand Rapids before holding events in Lansing and Oakland County, northwest of Detroit. The former president has his own event in Oakland County in the afternoon before an evening rally in Detroit. Musician Usher is expected to join Kamala Harris at a rally in Atlanta. King Charles and Queen Camilla are enjoying a rest day in Sydney ahead of events in Sydney and Canberra. The pair arrived last night in Sydney and were greeted on the tarmac by Prime Minister Anthony Albanese and his partner Jodie Hayden. Their trip won't be as action-packed as previous visits due to the King's cancer treatment, which has been temporarily paused. The royal visit also gave a young royalist an opportunity to meet the monarchs. Kai was diagnosed with a serious blood disorder at 9 years old and has been wishing for a royal experience of his own. Make-A-Wish Australia stepped in, and last night Kai was given the opportunity to present Queen Camilla with flowers at the couple's official welcome. He explains how it made him feel.
I was slightly nervous, but I was also excited. So from a young age I have, because my dad would go on holidays to England and buy back like royal family toys, which I play with. So I got diagnosed with severe aplastic anemia, which is a blood disorder that affects the bone marrow. So I had to get a transplant that my sister donated. So 1.6 litres.
In rugby league, the Jillaroos have thrashed Papua New Guinea in a record-breaking performance to open their Pacific Championship campaign. Meanwhile, a new-look Kangaroos side had its first hit-out, claiming a comfortable victory over Tonga at Lang Park last night.
Our best football's still in front of us, which is exciting.
Earlier in the night, the Australian Jillaroos produced a dominant performance over the Papua New Guinea Orchids, defeating them by 84 points.
Straight up the middle go the green and gold.
PNG started well and held the Aussies out for 8 minutes before the floodgates opened. Winger Jakaya Whitfeld crossed the line 5 times
and blows straight past the Papua New Guinean fullback.
And Julia Robinson made history by becoming the first Jillaroo to score 6 tries in a test.
You need 2 hands now.
When you think Jillaroo, you think Julia Robinson, so what she does, brings to the team off the field and on the field is always the same. She's an incredible human, an incredible footballer.
Australia went on to score a record 17 tries to finish the game 84 points to 0. The Jillaroos will play New Zealand in Christchurch in round 2 of the Pacific Championship next Sunday. Anthea Moody, ABC News.
In the AFLW, Hawthorn have thumped Greater Western Sydney 61 points to 24 in Melbourne. Eileen Gilroy kicked 3 goals, while midfielder Emily Bates made 34 disposals. The win pushes the side to the top of the league ladder before they play Melbourne next week in Cairns. In the A-League men's, Auckland FC have had their first ever win in their inaugural game against Brisbane Roar. Brisbane defender Harry van der Sarg scored an own goal in the 8th minute before Logan Rogerson scored for the home side in the 74th. The win pushes Auckland to the top of the league ladder. Let's take a quick look at tomorrow's weather in the capitals. Brisbane and Sydney both partly cloudy, sunny in Canberra. In Melbourne, a possible morning shower. Partly cloudy in Hobart, sunny in Adelaide, some showers developing in Perth, and in Darwin, a shower or 2 with a top of 34 degrees. There's more on the ABC News app and on ABC iView too. I'm Ruby Cornish. Stay with us for ACT Votes live from the ABC's Election Centre.
Canberra, the beating heart of this nation.